Welcome to Void of Rules, where nightmares have no boundaries. In this channel, we explore the darkest corners of horror that most dare not enter. Every video takes you deeper into the shadows where forgotten terrors wait. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers by year's end. The void hungers for new souls. And now, let's dive into the void. I never wanted to end up in Ashwood Hollow, a town so small it barely registered on maps. Population 743, according to the faded welcome sign I passed 3 days ago. But after what happened at my last precinct, after losing my partner in that convenience store shootout, I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere to start over. The memory of that night still haunts me, the fluorescent lights of the convenience store flickering as we responded to what should have been a routine call. A desperate junkie with a gun. My partner, Detective Frank Reeves, had stepped in front of me when the first shot rang out. I still see his face in my dreams. The way his eyes widened in surprise more than pain. The dark bloom of red spreading across his white shirt as he collapsed in my arms. The metallic smell of blood, mixing with the artificial scent of cherry slushy, spilled across the linoleum floor. 3 weeks of administrative leave and mandatory counselling sessions later, I handed in my resignation. The big city police department I'd served for 8 years had suddenly become a maze of pitying looks and whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Every cruiser, every corner store, every emergency call reminded me of Frank, of my failure to protect him. So when I spotted the job listing for a deputy position in Ashwood Hollow, a town I'd never heard of in a county I couldn't place on a map, it felt like fate. A place with no memories, no ghosts, or so I thought. The journey to Ashwood Hollow had been an exercise in isolation. My GPS lost signal about 20 miles out, forcing me to rely on crumpled paper maps I'd bought at the last gas station. The highway narrowed to a 2-lane road, then to a winding strip of cracked asphalt that seemed to disappear into the forest rather than cut through it. Ancient oak trees crowded the roadside, their heavy branches creating a tunnel of shadow, even in mid-afternoon. By the time I crossed the town line, marked by that faded population sign, I passed only 3 other vehicles in an hour. The town itself appeared suddenly, as if materializing from the mist that clung to the valley floor. Main Street was a short stretch of weathered storefronts, a hardware store, a diner, a small grocery, and a post office that doubled as the town hall. Most buildings dated back to the early 1900s, their facades telling stories of a once prosperous mining town, now clinging to existence through sheer stubborn will. When I reported to the station my first morning, I was surprised to find it housed in what had clearly once been someone's home, a Victorian-style building with gingerbread trim and a wraparound porch, now retrofitted with a single holding cell in what must have been a dining room and dispatch equipment crowded onto an antique roll-top desk. The smell of old coffee and cheap disinfectant hung in the air as Sheriff Tanner led me through the station. Beneath those smells was something else. The musty scent of old paper, of secrets filed away and forgotten. 4 desks, 3 filing cabinets, and a coffee maker that looked like it predated my birth. This was the entirety of the Ashwood Hollow Sheriff's Department. "Not much happens after dark," Sheriff Tanner said, keys jingling as he headed for the door. His grey hair caught the light, his permanent sunburn making his face look perpetually flushed. I noticed the deep creases around his eyes didn't match his easy smile. This was a man who carried worries he didn't speak aloud. "Marla will show you the ropes. Night shift's pretty quiet. Just keep an eye on the county road and make sure the teenagers don't get too rowdy at the lake." The way he emphasized after dark gave me pause, but before I could ask him to elaborate, he was already halfway out the door. "Oh, and price," he added, turning back with a forced casualness. "Stick to the usual routes. Some of the back roads get tricky at night. easy to get turned around. Deputy. Marla Greene barely acknowledged me from where she sat organising paperwork. A woman in her 40s with a severe ponytail and weathered skin. She had the look of someone who'd seen too much. What struck me most were her eyes. Dark and constantly darting to the windows, watching the setting sun with growing anxiety. "You're the third new hire this year," she said finally, her voice flat. No welcome to the team or friendly small talk. Just that statement delivered like an accusation. "Lucky you, I guess," I replied, trying for humour. She didn't smile. The other two didn't last a week. James quit. Katie. She trailed off, shuffling her papers. Katie didn't make it home one morning. A chill ran through me. What happened? Greene shrugged, but the tightness in her shoulders betrayed her affected nonchalance. "Official report says animal attack. We get mountain lions sometimes, coyotes." The unspoken "but" hung in the air between us. I waited for her to continue, but she just returned to her paperwork, effectively dismissing me. I spent the rest of the day familiarising myself with the station and the town, meeting the dispatcher, Phil, a heavy-set man with kind eyes and a nervous habit of cracking his knuckles, learning the filing system which seemed deliberately designed to confuse outsiders, and reviewing the surprisingly thin stack of case files from the past year. Petty theft, public intoxication, domestic disputes, nothing more serious than a bar fight that had ended with 2 broken noses. Nothing that explained the tension I felt in every interaction, the way conversations died when I entered the small break room, or the strange symbols I noticed carved into the underside of the dispatch desk when I dropped my pen and bent to retrieve it. Certainly nothing that explained what had happened to Katie. As the day wore on, I noticed a subtle shift in the station's atmosphere. The already quiet building grew eerily silent as afternoon faded. Phil's shift ended, replaced by a night dispatcher I hadn't met yet, a thin woman named Eleanor, who kept a small wooden cross on her console and jumped at every sound. Sheriff Tanner had left hours ago, mentioning something about checking on his mother, though I'd later learn he had no living relatives. The 2 other deputies, Ramirez and Burkholder, hurried to finish their paperwork before sunset, exchanging meaningful glances when they thought I wasn't looking. By 6 o'clock the station was nearly empty. Burkholder paused at the door on his way out, looking like he wanted to say something, but Greene silenced him with a sharp look. Whatever warning he might have offered died on his lips, replaced with a muttered, "Good luck," before he practically ran to his truck. As twilight descended over Ashwood Hollow, I watched the transformation outside. The town seemed to contract, lights in windows extinguished one by one, blinds drawn, doors locked. Even the streetlights seemed dimmer than they should be, creating pools of watery illumination rather than the safety they promised. Greene slid a laminated card across the desk. It was old, the edges frayed, and what looked disturbingly like dried blood spattered one corner. I noticed her hands trembled slightly, the first sign of emotion I'd seen from her. "Rules for the night shift, 10 p.m, 6 a.m, I read aloud. "Follow them," she said, checking her watch. "Or don't. You won't last till dawn otherwise." The rules were: 1. At 11:13 p.m. sharp, turn off your dash cam and radio for exactly 13 minutes. Do not speak. Do not move. Do not look out the windows. 2. If you hear crying from the woods near mile marker 7, do not investigate. It's not a person. 3. You'll see a man in a state trooper uniform around 2:33 a.m. He will not speak. If he offers you a cigarette, take it, but don't smoke it. 4. Avoid taking calls from Unit 13. That unit was decommissioned after the fire. 5. If you arrest someone, check their reflection. If it's missing, do not take them to the station. 6. Before sunrise, you must be alone, even if it means killing your partner. I laughed, flipping the card over to see if there was more. You can't be serious. The fluorescent light above us flickered, casting momentary shadows across Greene's face that made her look decades older. "We had an officer last January, Nichols, good cop, family man. He thought it was a joke too." She opened her desk drawer and removed a small photo frame, sliding it across to me. This was taken at the department Christmas party, 6 weeks before his funeral. The photo showed a smiling man in his 30s, arm around a pretty blonde woman, 2 young children crowded in front of them. Typical family portrait, except for one detail. Someone had scratched out the man's eyes in the photo with what looked like a pin or needle. The precision was disturbing, the tiny holes penetrating the glossy paper but leaving the rest of his face untouched. "What happened to him?" I asked, suddenly not feeling like laughing anymore. Broke rule number 1, got curious, looked out the window at 11:18. She took the photo back, her expression unreadable. The funeral was closed casket. Deputy Greene didn't smile, her expression remained flat, almost resigned. Patrol cars out back, keys are in the ignition. The sun had fully set now, leaving Ashwood Hollow cloaked in darkness. As I followed Greene to the parking lot, I noticed how quickly the night had claimed the town. No gentle fade of twilight, just a sudden, absolute dark that seemed to press against the few streetlights like a living thing. I stopped at the station door, catching Greene's arm. "Look, I appreciate a good joke, but what's the real story here? Is this some departmental tradition? Breaking the new guy?" She pulled her arm away as if my touch burned her. "You think I'd joke about Nichols? About what happened to Katie?" Her voice was low, intense. "You wear a badge in Ashwood Hollow. You follow the rules. Simple as that. And if I don't, what happens if I just do regular police work?" I pressed. Greene's face hardened. "Then you better hope whatever gets you kills you quick." She pushed through the door, not looking back to see if I followed. The night air struck me like a physical blow, unnaturally cold for early autumn, carrying scents of pine, damp soil, and something else. Something rotten, like meat left too long in the sun. I hurried to catch up with Greene, suddenly reluctant to be alone in the darkened parking lot. The patrol car was an older model Crown Victoria, its black and white paint job dulled by years of service. The interior smelled of gun oil, stale coffee, and faintly of copper, like old pennies or dried blood. I ran my fingers along a series of deep scratches on the passenger side door, wondering what had left them. They looked almost like claw marks. "This some kind of small-town hazing ritual?" I asked, climbing into the passenger seat of the cruiser, trying once more for levity, despite the growing unease in my gut. Scare the city boy. Greene's only response was to start the engine and pull onto the empty main street. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating storefront after closed storefront. A diner still lit but empty. The lone waitress staring out at us with hollow eyes as we passed. A hardware store with a faded, going out of business sign that looked years old. Strange symbols painted above the door, in what might have been red paint, or something else. A small movie theatre showing a film I'd never heard of. Its marquee letters arranged to spell "Don't Stay After Dark," rather than any movie title. Something scurried across the road ahead of us. Too large for a cat, too small for a deer. Its movements were jerky and unnatural, and as our headlights caught it, I could have sworn it stood upright for a moment on hind legs before darting into the shadows. "What was that?" I asked, leaning forward to peer through the windshield. Greene didn't answer, but her knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as she accelerated slightly. The first few hours of patrol were uneventful, at least on the surface. We drove the perimeter of the small town 3 times, then ventured onto the county roads that connected Ashwood Hollow to neighbouring communities. Greene was methodical, following what seemed to be a predetermined route that specifically avoided certain areas. When I suggested a shortcut through a residential neighbourhood, she shook her head sharply and made a 3-point turn to go the long way around. Ashwood Hollow at night was a different world. pitch black beyond the reach of sporadic streetlights, houses dark, except for the occasional blue flicker of a television. Many homes had strange arrangements on their porches or windowsills. Bundles of dried herbs, small bowls of what looked like salt, carved wooden figures facing outward as if standing guard. Some doors were painted with symbols similar to those I'd seen at the hardware store. The forest pressed in close to the roads, a wall of impenetrable shadow that seemed to swallow our headlights. I noticed Greene checking her watch frequently as the night wore on. Her tension was contagious, and I found myself scanning the darkness with increasing vigilance, my hand straying to my holstered weapon at every shadow or sound. At one point we passed an old cemetery set back from the road, its wrought iron gates hanging open despite the late hour. I could have sworn I saw movement among the gravestones, figures moving with an odd, gliding gait between the markers, gathering around a central monument that glowed faintly in the moonlight. When I blinked, the scene was still, just an empty graveyard with the wind stirring dead leaves across the ground. "Did you see that?" I asked, turning in my seat to look back as we passed. Greene accelerated slightly. "We don't look at the cemetery after dark," was all she said. As our shift approached the halfway mark, I began to wonder if the rules were simply a way to manage the psychological effects of night patrol in an isolated rural area. The human mind plays tricks in the dark, sees patterns and threats where none exist. Perhaps the rules were just a coping mechanism, a way to create structure and safety in the lonely hours when the rest of the world sleeps. "So, what's the deal with these rules?" I asked as we cruised down Main Street for the third time. "Some kind of joke?" Greene's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "It's 11:07, she said, ignoring my question. 6 minutes. The abrupt shift in her demeanour sent a chill down my spine. Until now she'd been tense but functional. Suddenly she looked terrified. I sighed, pulling out the laminated card to humour her. "Fine. Rule 1. At 11:13 turn off dashcam and radio for 13 minutes. Don't move, speak, or look outside. Seems unnecessarily specific." 5 minutes, she whispered, pulling the patrol car onto a side road that ended in a gravel turnaround facing the woods. The area was oddly familiar, though I was certain we hadn't been here before during our patrol. "What are we doing here?" I looked around, noting how isolated the spot was. No houses visible, no streetlights, just thick forest on 3 sides. The kind of place perfect for an ambush. 3 minutes. Greene's voice had dropped to a whisper, her eyes fixed on the digital clock on the dashboard. She reached under her seat and withdrew a small cloth bag that rattled with its contents. With trembling fingers, she loosened the drawstring and sprinkled what looked like a mixture of salt and dried herbs in a line across the dashboard. "This is ridiculous," I said, but something in her rigid posture made me uneasy. The radio crackled with static, unusual since we hadn't received a single call all night. Through the static, I thought I heard a voice, a child perhaps, singing a nursery rhyme in a language I didn't recognize. 1 minute, Greene said, her voice barely audible. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple despite the car's chill. At exactly 11:13 p.m, she reached over and switched off the dashcam, then the radio. The sudden silence was oppressive. She quickly extinguished the interior lights, leaving us in near total darkness. I was about to speak when she placed a finger to her lips, eyes wide with warning. Her other hand clutched what I now recognized as a rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. For the first few minutes, I felt foolish sitting in perfect stillness. The rational part of my brain, the part trained in police procedures and evidence-based investigation, insisted this was absurd. But another part, something older and more primitive, recognized the animal panic in Greene's eyes and responded with its own alarm bells. And then I heard it, footsteps in the gravel circling our vehicle, heavy shuffling steps that didn't sound quite human. Not the steady rhythm of a person walking, but an uneven drag thump, drag thump. that made my skin crawl. Something brushed against the car door beside me, a scratching sensation like overgrown fingernails on metal. The sound travelled slowly along the side of the vehicle, a deliberate caress that left faint marks in its wake. The temperature plummeted so suddenly that the windows frosted over in seconds. My breath clouded in front of my face despite the mild autumn night. A low humming sound vibrated through the car, making my vision blur at the edges. A sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, that I felt in my bones more than heard with my ears. The air grew thick with a smell I recognized from my days on the force, the unmistakable stench of decomposition, of bodies left undiscovered for days in summer heat. It filled the car despite the closed windows, so strong I had to fight the urge to gag. I desperately wanted to look out the window to see what was circling us, but Greene's warning expression kept me frozen in place. Minutes stretched like hours in the silence, marked only by our shallow breathing and the continuing drag thump outside. Then came the tapping, rhythmic, deliberate, on each window of the car. Tap, 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 moving around us in a clockwise pattern, pausing as if waiting for a response. Not the casual knock of knuckles, but something harder, sharper, something that left tiny star-shaped cracks in the glass with each impact. The passenger window beside me darkened as something pressed against it from outside, a shape blacker than the night, blocking what little moonlight filtered through the trees. I could feel its attention focused on me, a weight of malevolence that made it hard to breathe. Though I kept my eyes fixed on the dashboard as instructed, my peripheral vision caught movement, something long and jointed sliding down the glass, leaving trails of viscous fluid that glowed faintly phosphorescent in the darkness. I nearly jumped out of my skin when something bumped against the underside of the car, hard enough to rock it slightly on its suspension. The sound of metal straining, bending under pressure, the creak of the chassis as if a great weight had settled on the roof. Through it all, Greene remained perfectly still, her eyes closed now, lips still moving in silent prayer. Her composure, in the face of whatever circled us, was both reassuring and terrifying. If she'd panicked, I might have convinced myself it was all a hoax, a test for the new guy. But her genuine fear told me everything I needed to know. I could see Greene silently counting the minutes on her watch. When she reached 13, she immediately restarted the car systems. The radio returned with a burst of normal chatter, the dashcam light glowing green. The interior lights flickered back on, revealing frost patterns on the windows that resembled crude, elongated handprints. As suddenly as it had arrived, the presence was gone. The temperature normalized, the smell dissipated, and the night outside seemed ordinary again. "What the hell was that?" I demanded, my heart still hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Greene pulled back onto the road, her expression grim. Sweat had plastered strands of hair to her forehead, and her hands trembled slightly on the wheel. "Rule 1, you followed it. Good. But what?" Officer Nichols didn't last January. Got curious, looked out the window at 11:18. She paused, and for a moment I thought she might cry. He started screaming, clawing at his eyes. By the time I could get the car started again, She swallowed hard. Funeral was closed casket. My mouth went dry. "You're telling me something killed him for looking out a window?" Greene didn't answer, just continued driving. Her eyes scanned the darkness with practiced vigilance. After several minutes of silence, she spoke again, her voice steadier now. "There are things in Ashwood Hollow that don't show themselves in daylight. Things that have been here longer than the town, longer than people." She glanced at me briefly. "The rules aren't jokes or superstitions, they're survival." "What are these things? Some kind of animal?" I asked, though I knew no animal could explain what I'd just experienced. "The old-timers have names for them, the night walkers, the hollow folk. The quiet ones. She shrugged. Names don't matter much. What matters is respecting their territory, their rituals, their hunger. Hunger, I echoed, not liking the implication. Greene just nodded, turning onto a better-lit street that led back towards the centre of town. 5 more hours till dawn, she said. 4 more rules to follow. Route takes us straight through. There are other routes. I was about to argue when I heard it, a child's cry, drifting from the dark trees to our right. Faint but distinct. Did you hear that? I sat up straighter, reaching for the door handle instinctively. Sounds like a kid. Greene's hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. Rule 2, she hissed. The crying came again, louder this time. A child's voice, frightened and alone. Help me. Please, I'm lost. Every instinct I had as a police officer screamed to investigate. There's a child in those woods. It's not a child, Greene said, accelerating the car. Rule 2 exists for a reason. The crying changed, becoming more desperate. Officer, please, I can see your lights. I'm hurt. How did it know we were officers? The crawling sense of wrongness intensified as I stared into the woods. Between the trees, something moved. A small shape, perhaps a child's silhouette. But the proportions weren't quite right. The arms hung too low, the head tilted at an impossible angle. Drive, I whispered, the word catching in my throat. Greene hit the gas, but the crying followed us, somehow keeping pace with the patrol car for nearly a mile before gradually fading. What was that thing? I asked when I could finally speak again. Locals call it the Weeping Wanderer, Greene said, her voice flat. It mimics voices, usually children, sometimes adults, you know. Has anyone ever gone to investigate? Twice that I know of. She took a sharp turn onto a side road. First time was before my tenure. Ranger from the state park. They found his vehicle a week later, empty. The second was a rookie, about 6 years back. Officer Dawkins. What happened to him? Greene's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. We found pieces of him, over a 3-mile radius. The rest of our patrol continued in silence, the weight of the rules pressing heavier on my mind with each passing hour. I had come to Ashwood Hollow seeking peace after the trauma of my partner's death. Instead, I'd found something far more sinister than any city crime scene. The digital clock on the dashboard read 2:27 a.m. when Greene pulled into the parking lot of an abandoned gas station on the outskirts of town. Rule 3, she said simply, killing the engine. I checked the laminated card. The state trooper at 2:33. You can't seriously expect. 6 minutes, she interrupted, staring straight ahead at the derelict building. We sat in silence as the minutes ticked by. Despite myself, I felt my pulse quickening as the clock hit 2:32. This is, I began but stopped mid-sentence. A figure had appeared beside the old gas pumps. A man in a state trooper uniform, complete with campaign hat and aviator sunglasses, despite the darkness. He stood perfectly still, facing our patrol car. That's not possible, I whispered. He wasn't there a second ago. Greene didn't respond, her eyes locked on the figure. The trooper began walking toward us with an odd, gliding gait, as if his feet weren't quite touching the ground. As he drew closer, I could see details that sent ice through my veins. His skin had a waxy, greyish tinge, and beneath the sunglasses there seemed to be only dark hollows where eyes should be. He stopped beside my window and stood waiting. Following some instinct, I rolled it down. The smell hit me immediately. Gasoline and something putrid underneath. The trooper reached into his pocket with jerky movements and produced a pack of cigarettes. With exaggerated care, he extended one toward me. My hand trembled as I took it, remembering the rule. The cigarette felt impossibly cold between my fingers, like it had been stored in a freezer. The trooper's lips stretched into what might have been a smile, revealing teeth too numerous and sharp to be human. He tipped his hat once, then turned and walked back towards the gas pumps, fading into nothingness before he reached them. I looked down at the cigarette in my hand. Where the filter should have been white, it was stained a deep crimson, as if dipped in blood. "What do I do with this?" I asked Greene, fighting the urge to throw it away. "Keep it," she said. "Don't smoke it. Don't throw it away." "Why? What happens if someone smokes it?" Greene put the car in drive. Last summer, a tourist came through, State Trooper Wilkins, stopped him for speeding right here, offered him a cigarette as a friendly gesture. She paused. They found the tourist's car 3 days later. The cigarette had burned down to the filter, but there was no ash, and no tourist, just a pile of clothes on the driver's seat, soaked in what the coroner identified as liquefied human tissue. As we pulled away, I carefully placed the cigarette in my breast pocket, noticing that it remained ice cold through the fabric of my uniform. "Who was he?" I asked. "The trooper, Highway Patrolman James Mercer, died in 1967 while pursuing a suspect. His cruiser crashed and burned right where that gas station stands. He's been offering his last cigarette to passing officers ever since." I glanced back at the abandoned gas station as it disappeared from view. "How many rules have you broken?" I asked quietly. A ghost of a smile crossed Greene's face. "None. That's why I'm still here." The radio had been quiet for hours when it suddenly crackled to life around 3:15 a.m. "Dispatch to Unit 4. Come in," came a female voice I didn't recognize. Our unit was 4, but the dispatcher we'd checked in with earlier had been a man named Phil. Greene's expression tightened. "Don't answer it," she warned. The radio crackled again. "Unit 4, this is Unit 13. Do you copy? We have a situation at the old Holloway place, requesting backup." My blood ran cold. Rule 4, avoid taking calls from Unit 13. That unit was decommissioned after the fire. "What fire?" I whispered. Greene kept driving, deliberately ignoring the radio as it called out again, more insistent this time. The voice had changed slightly, a hint of something guttural, beneath the professional tone. "Unit 4, respond. Officer down. Backup needed." "The Holloway place burned down in 1993, Greene finally said, her voice tight. "Took 4 officers with it. They were responding to a domestic disturbance call. Something was waiting for them inside." The radio voice became distorted, deepening into a growl. "Price, Daniel Price, we see you, come to us." I recoiled. "How does it know my name?" "It knows everyone's name eventually," Greene said, reaching over to switch off the radio entirely. In the moment before the sound cut out, I heard a horrible wet chuckling, followed by screams that sounded like they came from multiple throats. We drove in silence for several minutes before Greene pulled over, beside an overgrown lot where only a stone foundation remained, of what must have been the Holloway house. "They never rebuilt," she said. "The ground is wrong here now." As we sat staring at the ruins, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Impossible, since there was no cell service in this part of town. The screen showed an incoming call from Unit 13. I declined it immediately, but not before catching a glimpse of a photo that definitely hadn't been stored on my phone. A burned-out patrol car with a charred body still visible in the driver's seat, mouth open in a permanent scream. "It's getting more aggressive," Greene muttered. "It usually doesn't try the personal phones." "What happens if you answer?" "You hear what they heard in their final moments, and then you join them." She put the car in drive. The fire was no accident, and those officers weren't the first sacrifice Ashwood Hollow has demanded. "Sacrifice?" The word hung in the air between us. "What are you talking about?" Greene glanced at me, then back at the road. "You're asking questions I can't answer. Not yet." "Is that another rule? Nothing in writing about what's really going on here?" She didn't respond. The silence stretched, filled only by the low hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. Normal dispatch chatter now, nothing sinister. How long have you been doing this? I finally asked. Greene checked her rearview mirror before answering. 7 years, longest anyone's lasted on the night shift since done at 86. And before you? Officers came and went, none lasted more than a few months. Her expression darkened. The town has an appetite. I wanted to press further, but something in her demeanour made me hold back. Instead, I watched the road ahead, the headlights illuminating the empty streets of Ashwood Hollow. No pedestrians, no other vehicles, just darkness and the occasional flutter of movement at the edge of the forest. At 4:30 a.m, we received a legitimate call from dispatch about a disturbance at the 24-hour diner on the highway. Standard procedure. Apparently a patron was getting aggressive with the overnight staff. When we arrived, the situation seemed ordinary enough. A well-dressed man in his 30s was arguing with a frightened waitress. He seemed intoxicated, swaying slightly on his feet. "Evening, sir," I said, approaching cautiously. "Mind stepping outside for a chat?" The man turned to me, his movements oddly fluid. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding." Something about his voice raised the hairs on my neck. A hollow quality, as if it were coming from somewhere else rather than his throat. Standard protocol took over. I escorted him outside while Greene spoke with the waitress. The man offered no resistance as I patted him down, no weapons, and began asking routine questions. He gave his name as Michael Caldwell, claimed he lived on Oak Street, and insisted he'd had only 2 drinks, but his skin felt cold to the touch and he never blinked, not once. I was about to let him go with a warning when Greene emerged from the diner and gave me a significant look. Remembering Rule 5, I positioned myself so the man stood between me and the patrol car's side mirror. My heart nearly stopped. The mirror reflected the empty parking lot behind him, no reflection of the man at all. "Mr. Caldwell," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, "I'm going to need you to place your hands behind your back." The thing wearing Michael Caldwell's face smiled, its mouth stretching wider than any human mouth should. "You're new," it said, the hollow voice dropping all pretense of humanity. "Fresh blood. They always bring in fresh blood when the hunger grows." I reached for my handcuffs, but faster than I could track, the creature's arm shot out, gripping my wrist. Its fingers elongated, wrapping around my arm, like pale tentacles. "We'll have you eventually," it whispered, leaning close. Its breath smelled like a grave. "The town always feeds us. That's the arrangement." Greene appeared behind it, pressing her service weapon to its head. "Let him go," she ordered. "You know the rules. No feeding during shift change." The thing laughed, a sound like bones breaking, but released me. "The rules are changing, Marla. You can feel it too. The hunger grows deeper. Soon, all rules will be broken." It stepped back, its form rippling slightly like heat waves rising from asphalt. "Enjoy your remaining hours, Officer Price. Dawn isn't as safe as they've told you." Then it simply walked away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the diner's lights. I made no move to follow, my wrist burning where it had touched me. "What was that?" I asked, my voice shaking. "One of the Hollow's permanent residents," Greene said, holstering her weapon. "They're normally bound by certain limitations, but something's changed recently. They're getting bolder." "You called it a shift change. What did you mean?" Greene checked her watch. "Almost 5 a.m. We should head back toward the station." She refused to say more, but I noticed her eyes constantly darting to me, then away, as if assessing something. Her hand never strayed far from her holster. I suddenly remembered the final rule, and a cold weight settled in my stomach. As we drove back toward town, the eastern sky began to lighten imperceptibly, dawn approaching. Rule 6 hung between us like a blade. "Before sunrise, you must be alone," I recited quietly, "even if it means killing your partner." Greene's expression revealed nothing. "You've done well so far," she said. "Better than most." "How many others have there been?" "Since I started, 7. None lasted more than 3 nights. And you? How long have you been doing this? A strange smile crossed her face. Longer than you'd believe. We were passing through the town square when I decided to confront the situation head on. I'm not going to kill you, Greene, and I'm pretty sure you're not going to kill me. So, what's Rule 6 really about? She pulled the car over beside the town's memorial statue, a granite obelisk commemorating Ashwood Hollow's founding in 1857. The sky was definitely brighter now, the darkness retreating. 50 years ago, she said, the town made a bargain, peace and prosperity during daylight hours, in exchange for certain accommodations after dark. What kind of accommodations? Fresh blood, new souls, 1 newcomer every month to sustain the bargain. I reached for my weapon, but Greene was faster, already pointing her gun at me. It's not personal, she said. Without the sacrifice, everyone suffers. I've seen what happens when the bargain is broken. I won't let that happen again. You're insane, I said, looking for an opening, any distraction. Check your pocket, she replied. Confused, I reached into my breast pocket where I'd placed the state trooper's cigarette. It was gone. Rule 3, Greene said. Take the cigarette, but don't smoke it. You were supposed to give it to me. That was your mistake. Horror dawned as I realized the trap. The cigarette was a marker. The town has chosen its sacrifice. I lunged for the door handle, but my limbs suddenly felt heavy, unresponsive. A numbness spread from my chest outward. You never actually touched the cigarette, Greene explained, watching impassively as I struggled to move. That would have been too obvious. The transfer happens through proximity. By dawn, the marker completes its work. The first rays of sunlight broke over the eastern hills, streaming through the patrol car windows. Greene's expression softened almost to pity. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You seemed like a good officer. I tried to speak, but my voice failed me. With dawning horror, I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were becoming transparent, fading in the growing light. In the rearview mirror, my reflection was already gone. The last thing I heard before consciousness faded was the radio crackling to life. Good morning, Ashwood Hollow. Today is going to be another beautiful day. The time is 6 a.m. I died at dawn. Or at least I thought I did. Instead, I woke up in my patrol car, parked behind the Ashwood Hollow Sheriff's Department. The clock on the dashboard read 9:58 p.m, almost time for shift change. A tap on my window made me jump. Sheriff Tanner stood there, that same sunburned face smiling through the glass. Early for your shift, he commented as I rolled down the window. Eager to get started. My mouth was dry. What day is it? Same as yesterday, Wednesday. Everything all right, Price? Wednesday. The same day I'd started my first shift, I looked down at myself. Same uniform, same badge, as if the previous night had never happened. The station door opened and Deputy Greene emerged. That severe ponytail and darting eyes, exactly as I remembered. One piece of advice, Tanner said, leaning closer. Follow Greene's rules. Might seem strange at first, but there's a method to the madness. As he walked away, I noticed something in my breast pocket, a folded piece of paper that hadn't been there before. With trembling fingers, I pulled it out and unfolded it. In crude, childish handwriting were the words, "Welcome to the night shift, Officer Price. This time follow all 6 rules." Greene approached my window, that same laminated card in her hand, the dried blood in the corner now unmistakably fresh. "Rules for the night shift," she said, passing it to me. "Follow them or don't. You won't last till dawn otherwise." As our fingers touched during the exchange, her skin felt ice cold, and in the reflection of my car window, I could see the patrol car, the station behind us, the darkening sky. But where Deputy Greene stood, there was nothing at all.